Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21 and Enfield Voices, and this is one of the many webinars today. And today we're going to look at what is a sort of a sad story. It's a story of a counsellor who tweeted something that was not particularly offensive, and then she was accused of anti-Semitism, and that led to 2 years of stress and harassment in a way. She was eventually completely exonerated, but she had to go through that. And we're going to talk about her story today, and the counsellor is Ayfer Orhan, and she's with us today, which is really great in the circumstances. Anyhow, can I start, Ayfer, by maybe you could tell us just briefly a little bit about yourself and how long you've been a counsellor.
Oh, hello, Francis, and hello to all your listeners and your people who are actually watching it at the moment. I've been a counsellor for almost 20 years, possibly more. I lost the track of counting after 15 years. But I've been an activist for over 40 years. You know, I started off really young. I was only 21, 22 years old when the New Cross Firehouse started it, and I got involved in huge activities at the time to get some justice to those young people who died and their families. Following that, of course, I got very much involved in a number of trade union activities, and that was my first introduction to trade unionism. When sort of like in the early 80s, 83, 84, there was a miners' strike, and I got very much involved in organising food parcels to South Yorkshire for families who were starving because of the strike that was going on at the time. And you could imagine the background for me. I was a young mother, just had my first baby. And so I felt a very drawn in, very much affinity with what was going on at the time. And I was angry enough to want to get really involved in campaigning against injustice.
So what made you...
I've been doing that all along throughout my life.
Yeah, so what made you then want to become a counsellor?
Oh, well, I moved to Enfield in the late 80s, I think, early 90s. And I'd had a number of activities with the national campaigns that's been going on where I was living before. And actually, all that happened was my first introduction to the Labour Party was I had a knock on my door. A wonderful councillor at the time, Councillor John Gorton, had knocked on my door, and then I was so alive with some of the things that was going on nationally, that he said, look, you need to join the Labour Party. I said, well, actually, I'm not ready yet. I've just moved in. I don't know my neighbourhood, and I haven't even spoken to my neighbour. Let me start doing a bit of that, and then I'll get involved. But I did start off with leafleting and campaigning for him and for others like Bill Chapman and so on. And then I got introduced to all sorts of wonderful, activists at the time, Jeff Rodin and Alex Mattingly from the Co-op Trade Union and so on. And it was a wonderful hive of different diverse group of councillors who were really much engaging with what's going on with the local community and campaigning and working hard. And so that left a very important mark in my life and my decision to join the Labour Party afterwards.
Okay, so you had this really successful and exciting time really as a councillor, but that now in the last 2 years you faced a crisis over a tweet you published. Can you tell us what that was? Well,
I don't know if, I'm sure your listeners are aware of my history on the council. I was cabinet member for 8 years on education and children's services and libraries. So I managed to keep all our libraries open during a time when we had huge amount of cuts, because I felt it was really important for families and young people. And then also I was a lead member on safeguarding, and so I got very much involved in that. And I should say at this moment that the officers in the councils are, the department I worked in was superb. My tweet was actually on the 22nd of March, and many people would have seen it by now. Certainly, I had a number of abusive emails and contacts from people who had seen it, but actually didn't know me, and that left a mark on my life for 2 years. And it was a tweet regarding the Golan Heights, and it was a company called Genie Energy, which I know nothing about. And the tweet said that they had been awarded. This was a thing that I homed in on. There was other things going on, but I homed in on the fact that it was awarded a contract to drill on the Golan Heights. And my tweet feed, actually, if people bother to read it, does say that I don't endorse any retweets. And I thought it was a clear statement of my position. And in tweeting it, my whole, the idea I had was to make sure that but if I get a response back, I didn't expect anything back from it, but if I was to get a response back, it would help me understand the context of the contract, particularly in an area that is, undergoing some activities, political activities. And that, I'm not putting a position out here at all. That wasn't my thinking. There was political activities, and I was aware of it. A company was awarded a contract, and I wanted to know more about it, actually. I wanted to know the context and the political decision. Because after all, I mean, for the past 20 years, that's what I do. I ask questions, and I will defend my right to ask those questions in court and for the rest of my life. I ask questions as a counsellor. So I asked a question through my tweet. And absolutely amazed with what happened afterwards.
Okay, well, let's talk about what happened. I mean, you were accused of, as a result of anti-Semitism, and many people would say there was no anti-Semitic content there at all. So why do you think that happened?
Well, I think in order to understand it, and this is what I believe might have happened, I feel that in order to understand it, I've got to explain the context of why the tweet happened, why that response from the council leader, Councillor Caliskan, took place at the time. And this is my opinion, I should add. I was one of the delegation of councillors who actually signed a letter, an open letter, which was then taken to the Labour Party, calling on the irregularities that took place around the council selections at the time. So my name is on that paper, on that letter. And I was, like other councillors, like other good, hardworking councillors, interested in an investigation taking place to find out why it was that a huge amount of Black councillors, really good, devoted and highly credible councillors got deselected, and other things that was happening at the time. Really concerned about the outcome. I mean, you have to bear in mind my history. My long history about campaigning on equal rights and discriminations and so on, and bullying and intimidation as well. So I was keen to get an outcome and keen for the Labour Party to investigate it. However, so that was, I had that letter. Then the other thing that was going on at the time was the parliamentary selection for Enfield North. Now, my colleagues, my friends knew that I would be interested in going. I was the most senior person that would go for it, in my opinion, and also the most experienced to have gone for it, in my opinion. And it was an all-woman shortlist, and all the other categories fitted really well, including the fact that actually it's my constituency. I live in the constituency. I live in Enfield North. So it was critical for me to have made a decision to have gone for it, and I would have gone for it. However, so the tweet happened around the period that all these things were happening. And I should say that when Councillor Caliskan made that public statement to the media, I was unaware that my tweet had caused any offence at all. No one bothered to give me a call, not the National Labour Party, no the local Labour Party, no one. So the first I'd heard of it was actually a phone call from a journalist from Jewish News who said, Councillor Orhan, I hear you've done this. There is a statement by Councillor Caliskan. Do you want to respond? And I was just in shock. I'm shaking now, recalling that period I had that first contact from a journalist.
She did say,
shock.
Yeah, I mean, Cllr Caliskan did say she had some complaints from members of the public. Now, she didn't say how many, she didn't say who they were, but you would have thought she would have checked the tweet you made herself. But she didn't, or she didn't seem to very well, because she made an instant decision. I mean, why do you think she did that? Or is it because you think that they were out to get you because you were challenging the status quo on the council?
Yes, I think, Francis, I mean, if you're asking my opinion, and my opinion is that the atmosphere at the time, and there's a large degree continues now, that a large number of councillors, senior and very experienced councillors, have left the Labour Party, and it continues, was really toxic. And it was an environment where we were really genuinely concerned about the selection process and what then subsequently went on as a result of that selection itself. So we wanted some answers, and we wanted the Labour Party to take action and to find out what was going on. And then, of course, we all know that Councillor Caliskan, a couple of years ago, I believe it was, got challenged by an external investigation for bullying a fellow councillor, a really hard-working senior fellow councillor that I have a huge respect for. And so there was a lot of intimidation, bullying going on in the background as well. And I believe it was an attempt to silence us. And I believe that that response was an attempt to silence me. I believe the response was an attempt to stop me from going for parliamentary selection in Enfield North. And I believe that attempt was to discredit and demean my character and my standing in the community. And I should say it went to the Turkish community as well. And it went national, international even. I had phone calls from Turkey and from Cyprus saying what's going on, what happened. So this was major for me and my family. Anyone who shares my name, was a major issue for us as a family.
And it went to the National Labour Party as well, who then launched an official investigation. How did it get that far?
Well, again, that was really strange. It was a bizarre, series of events that only later on, when I looked at the dates and the timings, and I kind of put it all together, and there was a clear pattern. And that, to me, was, again, and really concerning about how an individual seemingly could be attacked in such a way. And seemingly feel as if they will get no redress in making a lot of really incorrect accusations about an individual's character and about a single tweet. Well, yeah, the Labour Party hadn't sent me any correspondence, and they did do a day after it went into the national press. And so I got this strange email, and then subsequently, a few days later, a letter came into the post that said that I was under an investigation. But it was quite clear, actually. The letter did not say that I was suspended. It said that it quite clearly stated that I can carry on with my normal business, that the Labour Party doesn't assume guilt unless an investigation is mounted, which is really the right thing to have done. And so I would, again, it was really bizarre that immediately I had these press releases that I had been suspended, that the whip had been withdrawn. But you can't withdraw the whip until you go through a normal process, even locally. And that hadn't happened. So, there are rules in place to protect the innocent and to protect the individual until a time where they are proven guilty. And none of that took place for me. And we've experienced other cases where councillors did have disciplinary, and we did go through a process with them collectively as a Labour councillors, but none of that happened with me. And yet we had this statement that A, my tweet was anti-Semitic, B, that I had been suspended, and C, that the whip had been withdrawn. So these are really serious accusations labelled against an individual, irrespective of what you think of them personally. Serious accusations, and really this was out of, in my opinion, out of malice, and all the other things that I've said might have been linked to.
And the investigation then by the Labour Party went on for 2 long years. I mean, a decision that could have been taken in 5 minutes took 2 years. Why did you think it took that long?
It's a bizarre. I have no idea, Francis. It's one of the strangest situation I have ever found myself in, and I'm getting very emotional as I talk to you about it, because it was the most traumatic period of my life. You know, for 2 years I couldn't really function well. I mean, imagine that sort of strain on an individual. Many people would be listening and thinking and saying, well, you know, it wasn't that big a deal. You know, a suspension or a statement in the paper, you know, but it was for me, it was because of everything I stood for. Throughout my entire life, I stood for equalities, anti-discrimination. I fought and campaigned against apartheid in Africa. I am that old. And yet, I found that I was being accused of something that was completely alien to who I am as a human being. So it did have a lot of effect on me for over 2 years. But of course, I had a lot of abusive tweets.
Well, tell us about that.
Damaged.
I
had my locks changed.
Yeah,
huge amount of impact on my life.
Yeah, tell us about the 2-year period, which I think, you know, in the tweet that the leader put out, led to you having all this harassment and abuse, and you were in fear for your family. Just tell us, you know, about that, because that's really a horrific story.
Well, I'm recalling Joe Cox. You know, someone went into a surgery and killed this wonderful, hardworking local MP. And we did have a lot of training following that post about how we keep ourselves safe and so on. But so for me, with all that memory and all the changes in the way that we met residents and we went to their homes or we met them at the library and so on, that had to be new training for us, new way of working. But for me, when that tweet went out, immediately I had to enhance my risk assessment. So I would look behind me when I walk. I would cross to the other side when other people would come. I changed my locks in my home. I sat down with my family and I briefed them. I told them to be extra careful, to be vigilant. I had my daughter making sure she's a young woman who wants to go out and have fun, and she had to come in at a certain time. I mean, a 30-year-old being dictated to come in at a certain time is a horrific change in the way I had to live. And I was constantly on edge and constantly depressed about it. There wasn't a single day, Francis, that this incident in the media, this thing that was done to me, I didn't think of that. Not a single day that went back that I didn't think on it.
I mean, the 2 years. Horrific. I mean, the 2 years was a heck of a long time, and it went to the High Court, didn't it? And what did they find?
Well, I'm really grateful for the Fighting Fund that took my case on, because at that point I didn't know what was happening, and actually the Labour Party hadn't reached a conclusion in my case, which was over 2 years. And so I was desperate for an outcome. So the Fighting Fund, which is incidentally a fund that members and anyone could pay into to help individuals like me take their case to court. And I'm eternally grateful for them. And you could log on and actually contribute if people want to do that. And that would be really helpful if you do that. It's called the Fighting Fund. And so they took my case on. And what was really strange was that just at the preliminary hearing, when my name and my case went to the Labour Party with all the others, at the preliminary hearing, a few days before actual court case, the Labour Party sent me an email to say that they had the investigation had been concluded, that I was exonerated, and that I hadn't committed an offence on the Labour Party's rules. So one single tweet. It took them over 2 years to investigate a single tweet.
But the High Court also said that the length of time it took verged on being unlawful, didn't it?
Yes, it did mention the length of time it took, and the unnecessary cause of stress, and mentioned the unlawfulness of it. Yes.
And as you said, you got exonerated. Did you get an apology from anyone?
Sorry, Francis?
Did you get an apology from anyone?
No, I got this letter to say that the investigation had been concluded. There was not a single apology in that letter, and none since subsequently, and certainly no apologies locally from those individuals, an individual who made those public statements in the media. There is not even a human. I mean, there's a lot of councillors in Enfield Council. Some of them are really senior campaigners in the Labour Party, and some of them have been councillors for considerable time. One of them is actually a former deputy, a former chief whip in the Labour Party, and none asked the relevant questions. How it is that this person was suspended without following due process locally. Not one asked a question. And it took a deputation from another group of very senior and diligent councillors to take the matter to the Labour Party and ask for my so-called suspension locally to be lifted immediately, and it was done. But no apologies.
So no apology. Do you plan to take any further action, or is that the end of it now?
I'm still thinking about it, Francis, because I'm still talking to the Fighting Fund, and I hope to be talking to them again. I am at the moment anxious that there are still some other colleagues who are going through the court actions, and I am hopeful that their case will also be successful and they'll get a good outcome. And then I will look talking to them about possibility of collective action against the party, or against an action against the individual.
Okay, so
but I haven't decided yet, Francis.
Sure,
I'm still thinking.
Sure, I understand that. I mean, so after all this turmoil you went through, you decided then you wouldn't go back into the Labour group. In fact, you left the Labour Party. Why did you make that decision?
Well, it's the decision was a really hard one. It was extremely hard for me because I've campaigned at every national election, every local election, every European election, every GLA election since the 80s, and it was a hard decision for me. And Enfield is my home. I think the residents deserve more. I think there's a lot going on that I continue to be interested in. So I didn't want to come out of the council. I want to carry on serving the local community and our residents. And there's a lot of issues going on, particularly about LTNs and building on Green Belt. And the incinerator is a horrific decision that's being made that's completely alien to what should be taking place. So there's a lot of good campaigning that I would like to get involved. So it wasn't a matter of for me to come off the council. The decision was, do I move away from the Labour Party? And that was the biggest decision. And in the end, in the light of the current administration and the decisions they're making, that's going to have a detrimental, in my opinion, detrimental impact on the local community for many generations to come. Don't forget, I have children who live in the borough, and I now have a grandchild, and it's her future I'm thinking of. And so, it's important for me to join another political party. So I've now become an independent. I left the Labour Party, become an independent, and joined Community First, which sits on the council.
Okay, so now you've done that and you've been exonerated. Do you also feel a sense of liberation because you're no longer constricted by tight party discipline?
It's a bittersweet feeling, Francis. Bittersweet feeling, as anyone who's done something for such a long time and have been forced out through what happened to her, and harassment, intimidation, and being marginalised when you have so much to offer. it's a bittersweet feeling, but there is a degree of liberation because there's no longer the whip system. We're all independent counsellors in community first. I have a huge respect for those people who are in community first. They're wonderful, creative and hardworking counsellors. And some, like Councillor Anderson, I've known for years. I mean, we served, you know, in the late 90s together. So it's an honour to be working with them, absolute honour. So it's bittersweet, regretful about the Labour Party, but excited about the future.
So when, you know, accusations are thrown around like they are, and today lots of them are, in ways that are terribly unfair, I mean, what have you learned from this that might be helpful for others?
Yeah, I'm into learning, as you know, hence the reason why I tweeted that thing, so I could learn. But I think what I've learned is actually that politics isn't nasty. Quite often people say, well, it's a nasty world, politics. Actually, it's not true. Politics isn't nasty. It's the nasty people that are involved in politics that makes it nasty. So and that's really my message. I think it's, please have faith in the political system. And if you really feel strongly about something, and I'm reminded of the poem, you know, First They Came. And so if you do believe in the principle of that wonderful poem, which sits in my heart, in my very soul, then please carry on campaigning and opposing anything that you think is discriminatory and out of order, and do remain strong, because there are still good counsellors who believe in you and will work really hard with you to get the outcome that we hope the community is deserving.
Okay, and is there any lessons for the Labour Party, or indeed any other party, that they shouldn't go throwing around accusations without thinking, and also thinking about the consequences?
I think the only thing I can say, Francis, is that, look, there are rules. There are rules in any big organisation, you know, whether you're in work or political party, or nationally in government legislatives and so on, legislation and so on. So there is rules in political parties. You have to make sure those rules are robust enough, open and transparent enough to protect the innocent. And also there must be a process where you can get redress for those individuals who make false accusations against you, to the extent that they damage your credibility and your character and have a fundamental impact on your personal life. So those rules have got to be adhered to equally across which political spectrum the individual sits on, but also making sure that the individual has redress through a complaints process, but a proper complaints process, unlike the one we've experienced in the Labour Party, where the individual, the victim, gets redress. Apart from that, you know, there's really nothing else. It's sad to be, because of the inability, in my opinion, of the Labour Party to take the complaint seriously, and for me not to get redress apart from through the court. It was part of the decisions I made to leave, and it's so sad. What a loss.
And yourself now, you've gone through all this. Do you think you have a future in politics? Do you want a future in politics?
Well, certainly I'm still a councillor until next year. I would like to continue. I believe that I've still got a term in me. Certainly there's a lot of exciting things that's going on that, as I said, Francis, is fundamentally important for me to get right, certainly for the next generation of our residents and for my grandchild. You know, and the incinerator and the building on Greenbelt are fundamental issues that's close to my heart. So I applaud all those wonderful former councillors and party members who continue to campaign on those issues, and local residents, of course. And so I'd like to get involved in work of that nature. So who knows, Francis? Who knows what the future holds for any of us?
No,
but I would like to continue.
Yeah, that's true. Who knows for any of us? Anyhow, you've got this new lease of life now, and tinged with sadness, you've got liberation. So if anybody wanted to find out more about what you're doing, any of the campaigns you're involved in, make contact with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, we've got our Community First as a website. We regularly post our excuse me. We regularly post our speeches on that site because quite often we are not allowed to finish them, or we're not called to speak, and in the council, which is another concern of mine. But so we do put all our speeches on there, and also there are, I believe our contact details are on there. If they're not, then you'll find my contact details on the council website, because I remain councillor. And so there is easy way of getting in touch with me.
Okay. That's the Enfield council website, so yes, anyone can go there and get Ayfer's email there and contact her. Okay, well, we've come to the end of our 30 minutes, so thank you for doing it, because it's a tough story to tell, and it must be incredibly emotional because of what you've gone through, and I think you're very courageous to do it and to say the things you have. So I think all of us listening, including me, will say thank you very much for doing it, and I hope these sort of things don't happen again. It's a bit optimistic to believe in the future that they won't, but they shouldn't, because it's a story that should have a message that people should be a lot more careful, a lot fairer, and they should treat human beings as human beings. Anyhow, Ayfer, thank you for doing this interview with me today, and it has been great having you here. So we'll conclude this interview now.